Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here. My name is Diane and I am a clinical exercise physiologist. So I'm here this morning to share with you some learnings and findings from our Sláintecare funded Prime Time of Life programme with our partners in Laois Sports Partnership and DCU. So it's a 12-week, home-based, online, multimodal exercise training and health education programme for middle-aged and older adults in Laois. Okay, so some background information into our intervention and research study. So we know aging results in numerous negative physiological adaptations, some of which include reductions in bone mass and strength, reductions in muscle mass and the strength, power and function of that muscle, increases in fat mass, subcutaneous fat, but also the fat accumulation in organs and tissues of metabolic and cardiovascular importance. And this, of course, impacts cardiovascular and metabolic health. So we can get increased risk of a number of clinical conditions, increased risk of frailty and falls, and the morbidity and mortality that is associated with this, loss of independence, and unfortunately, reductions in physical health, mental health, and quality of life. These adaptations are exacerbated and accelerated when aging is combined with physical inactivity and compounded by the sedentary behaviour that has been associated with cocooning during COVID-19. We also know that physical activity can ameliorate the physiological decline associated with aging, and this is particularly evident when we compare sedentary older adults to their trained counterparts. And it's particularly a combination of multimodal physical activity that is really important in healthy aging. And this consists of aerobic, resistance, balance, and flexibility training. Okay, so the physiological adaptations that occur in response to training are specific to the mode of training undertaken. Briefly, some of the adaptations that occur in response to aerobic training, like walking, are an increase in aerobic fitness, improvements in body composition and lipid profile, increases in insulin sensitivity, metabolic health, and cardiovascular health. With regard to resistance training, so for example, squats and lunges and things like that, we get increased muscle mass, strength, endurance, power, bone density, balance, functional ability, and of course, reductions in frailty. In terms of flexibility training or stretching, this increases the mobility and range of motion in all of the joints, reduces pain and stiffness, and is very important in independent living. And finally, for balance training, this of course improves balance and stability. It decreases the risk of falls and the morbidity and mortality associated with same, particularly when it's combined with strength training. So all of these modes of training are very important in terms of healthy aging, but they're also crucial to the treatment and management of a number of clinical conditions. We know that physical activity is very important in healthy aging. However, we also know that the majority of middle-aged and older adults in Ireland are not meeting the basic physical activity guidelines for health, and these predominantly focus on aerobic training. The data regarding participation in the other modes of training is less, but we did a study last year in Laois looking at physical activity participation rates in 353 middle-aged and older adults. And what we found was 0% of these individuals are taking part in balance training. Only 6% of them are taking part in flexibility training, and only 14% of them are taking part in resistance training. And this has serious implications for their health and quality of life in later years. So the purpose of our study was to investigate whether 12 weeks of home-based, online, multimodal training with health education could improve fitness, strength, balance, flexibility, and perceptions of physical and mental health in middle-aged and older adults in Laois. So the data presented today relates to the 61 participants who completed the 12-week intervention. They were aged between 50 and 77 years and had a range of functional ability and clinical conditions, including hypertension, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, arthritis, osteoporosis, and more. So while this was an online intervention, it just worked out that the public health guidelines that were in place at the time of the pre and post testing allowed us to actually conduct the tests on site in a local community centre. And in the interest of time, I'll just list the tests that we did. So the International Physical Activity Short Form Questionnaire, the Promise 10 questionnaire to look at perceptions of physical and mental health, Sit and Reach, 30-second balance test, trunk flexor endurance test, hand grip strength test, the timed up and go test, the squat jump test, the sit to stand test, and the 6-minute walk test. And basically all of these allowed us to assess different components of fitness, including aerobic fitness, balance, flexibility, strength, power, and endurance. We then trained our participants in how to use Zoom and held a number of practice sessions. For the 12-week intervention, our lovely participants trained with us in their own home twice per week for 60 minutes per session. And the sessions looked something like this. So they consisted of a mixture of aerobic, resistance, balance and flexibility exercises, and of course an appropriate warm-up and cool down. We had 3 different levels for each exercise, so beginner, intermediate, advanced, and we had seated or standing versions if necessary. Each week, the participants underwent a 15-minute health education session. So we focused on things like exercise prescription for healthy aging, exercise prescription for different clinical conditions, how to train, how to progress your training, how to warm up, how to cool down, and much more. Of course, monitoring our participants as they train is very important. One of the many things we did was teach participants about intensity. We gave them colour-coded cards that reflected low, moderate and high intensity, and we checked for this at numerous points in the session, which is what you're looking at here. They commented that they found this really useful because they could take ownership over the effort that they worked at in the class and just understanding it and how to manage this. Our instructors monitored for technique and gave advice when needed, and our research team also monitored all of the sessions and called people individually and privately when necessary. We provided participants with a range of take-home resources related to the health education sessions. These included recordings of all of the workshops, extra videos for strength, balance and different things that were very beneficial to this group, circuit cards, training diaries and lots more. And all of these are freely available, so if anyone is interested in these resources, I would be more than happy to pass them on. And we repeated the testing at the end of the intervention. So when we conducted our statistical analysis, we found significant improvements in all of the tests that we conducted post-intervention. And ultimately, this means that there are significant improvements in aerobic fitness, strength, power, endurance, balance and flexibility in our participants. And we also found significant improvements in perception of their physical and mental health. Unfortunately, time is now rapidly disappearing, so I will conclude with a few points. So the positive benefits that we found post-intervention are associated with healthy aging, the prevention and management of clinical conditions that are prevalent in this population, functional independent living, reduced risk of frailty and falls, and improved physical health, mental health and quality of life. The social interaction that occurs in on-site interventions is absolutely fantastic and it's really important. It's different with online interventions, but many of our participants commented that the programme was a lifeline for them because they were so isolated because they were cocooning with COVID-19. So it's important not to underestimate the impact that online interventions actually can have in this regard. Online interventions overcome other barriers to physical activity participation that are commonly cited, including transport issues, weather, lack of time, and of course they're not impacted by COVID-19 restrictions. So while our participants were getting fitter and stronger during that time period, that was not the case for many of their age-matched counterparts. The health education sessions increase skills and knowledge, which in turn increases self-efficacy for individuals to adopt and maintain a health behaviour, which in this case is physical activity, which is very important. While there are some limitations to online interventions for middle-aged and older adults, there are many benefits and they should be considered as a good option moving forward. I would like to say a sincere thank you to our participants, partners and funders, and of course the conference organisers for inviting me to speak today. Thank you.